You lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and the silence becomes so loud it feels like it's screaming. 3 in the morning. Again. Your body is exhausted, your mind is wired, and somewhere between the two, there's a war happening that you didn't sign up for. You've tried everything. The breathing exercises, the supplements, the sleep hygiene protocols, the meditations that promise to quiet your mind, but nothing works. And what terrifies you most is not the tiredness anymore. It's the question that visits you in those hollow hours before dawn. What is wrong with me? Carl Jung discovered something about people like you that will change everything you think you know about sleeplessness. He found that insomnia is not a sleep disorder at all. It's a message from the deepest part of yourself, the part you've been ignoring, suppressing, pushing down into the basement of your consciousness. Your body refuses rest because your psyche refuses truth. And until you understand what that truth is, you will continue to lie awake night after night, haunted by something you can't quite name. Jung spent decades working with patients who couldn't sleep. Successful people, intelligent people, people who had everything figured out during daylight hours. But when darkness fell, they became prisoners of their own minds. And what Jung discovered was this: the unconscious does not sleep. It waits. It waits for the moment when your defenses are down, when the persona you wear during the day finally cracks, when the masks you show the world slip off your face. That moment is 3 in the morning. That moment is when the real you, the you that you've been running from, comes knocking, and it will not be ignored. Think about what happens in those sleepless hours. The thoughts that circle your mind are not random. They're specific. They're persistent. They're the same themes, the same fears, the same regrets, playing on an endless loop. Jung called this the return of the repressed. Everything you pushed away during the day comes flooding back at night. Every emotion you didn't allow yourself to feel, every truth you didn't allow yourself to speak, every part of yourself you decided was unacceptable, too dark, too dangerous, too real. That's what's keeping you awake. Not stress, not anxiety, not your circadian rhythm. It's the unlived life demanding to be lived. Jung identified what he called the shadow. This is not some mystical concept, it's psychological fact. The shadow is the collection of everything about yourself that you've rejected. The anger you were told was inappropriate. The desires you were taught to be ashamed of. The ambitions you learned to hide. The parts of your personality that didn't fit the image you needed to project to survive in your family, your relationship, your career, your society. You didn't destroy these parts. You can't. You just buried them. And what you bury alive stays alive. It festers, it grows, it gains power in the darkness. And when you lie down at night, when you finally stop moving, stop performing, stop pretending, it rises to the surface. Your shadow doesn't disappear just because you refuse to look at it. It waits until you're defenseless in the dark. Jung observed 3 types of people who couldn't sleep, and you will recognize yourself in one of them. The first type is running from their shadow. These are people who have spent their entire lives being good, being acceptable, being what everyone else needed them to be. They've never allowed themselves to be angry, to be selfish, to be difficult. They've swallowed their truth so many times it's become automatic. But the shadow doesn't forget, it accumulates. And at night, it presents the bill. You lie awake feeling anxious, but you can't name what you're anxious about. That's because the anxiety isn't about anything external. It's about the internal war between who you pretend to be and who you actually are. The second type is carrying unspoken truths. These are the people who know something they're not saying. They know their marriage is over, but they won't admit it. They know their career is killing them, but they won't leave. They know they're living a lie, but they won't speak the truth, because speaking it would require change, and change feels like death. So they carry the truth in their body. And the body, Jung discovered, never lies. It will not let you rest while you're living in deception. Your sleeplessness is not a malfunction. It's your psyche's way of saying, I will not participate in this lie anymore. The third type is living someone else's life. Jung called this identification with the persona. The persona is the mask you wear, the role you play, the version of yourself you present to the world. But some people become so identified with their persona, that they forget there's a real person underneath. They're living the life their parents wanted. They're pursuing the success society values. They're being the person their partner needs. But they've completely lost touch with their own authentic desires, their own authentic self. And at night, when the persona finally drops, there's a terrifying emptiness. Who am I when I'm not performing? The question haunts you because you don't have an answer, and your mind won't let you sleep until you find one. Here's what Jung understood that most sleep experts miss entirely. Your mind won't let you rest because you're betraying your authentic self. Every day you live in misalignment with who you truly are. Every day you suppress what needs to be expressed. Every day you choose safety over truth. You create a debt, a psychological debt, and that debt compounds. It grows interest. And eventually, it demands payment. That payment is your sleep. That payment is your peace. That payment is the gnawing sense that something is deeply, fundamentally wrong, even when everything on the surface looks fine. Society has trained you to see insomnia as a problem to be fixed, a symptom to be medicated, a disorder to be treated. But Jung saw it differently. He saw it as the psyche's rebellion against false living. Your sleeplessness is not the problem. Your sleeplessness is the alarm system. It's your unconscious mind saying, stop. Look at what you're doing. Look at who you've become. Look at the life you're living that isn't yours. And until you listen, until you actually hear what your psyche is trying to tell you, the alarm will keep ringing. Night after night after night, there's a collective conspiracy of exhaustion happening in our world. We live in a society that values productivity over authenticity, performance over presence, image over truth. We're taught to optimize ourselves, to maximize our potential, to become the best version of ourselves. But nobody asks the best version according to whom. We wear personas all day long: the competent professional, the loving partner, the responsible parent, the successful entrepreneur, the good friend. And these roles are necessary. Jung knew that. But when the persona becomes a prison, when you can't take it off even when you're alone, when you've forgotten there's a real person underneath the performance, that's when the sleeplessness begins. Because at night, the unconscious says, I am still here, I still exist, and you cannot ignore me forever. Jung had a warning that everyone with insomnia needs to hear. You cannot negotiate with the unconscious. You cannot bargain with it. You cannot trick it or manipulate it or convince it to leave you alone. The unconscious is older than your conscious mind. It's wiser, it's more patient, and it has one agenda: wholeness. It wants you to become whole. It wants you to integrate what you've rejected. It wants you to live the life that is actually yours, not the life you think you should live. And it will use whatever means necessary to get your attention, including taking away your sleep, including making you so exhausted, so desperate, so broken that you finally have no choice but to listen. That's not cruelty. That's love. The fierce love of the psyche that refuses to let you sleepwalk through your one precious life. You've been treating insomnia like an enemy to be defeated, like a malfunction in your biology that needs fixing with pills, meditation apps, sleep hygiene protocols. But Jung discovered something that will change how you understand every sleepless night you've ever endured. Your insomnia isn't the problem. It's the cure trying to happen. And the moment you stop fighting it and start listening to it, everything shifts. Not because you've learned some new technique, but because you've finally stopped running from what the darkness has been trying to show you. Let me take you into the descent. The part nobody wants to talk about. The part where Jung tells you that the only way out is through. You cannot negotiate with the unconscious. You cannot bargain with it. You cannot trick it into letting you sleep while you continue living a lie. The psyche is far more intelligent than your conscious mind, and it will not be fooled by your strategies. It will not accept your compromises. It demands total honesty, complete integration, and it will keep you awake every single night until you give it what it wants. Jung called this the night sea journey, the descent into the unconscious where you must face everything you've been avoiding. Every sleepless night is an invitation into this journey. The insomnia is the boat, the darkness is the ocean. And what you find down there in the depths, that's what's been keeping you awake. Not anxiety about tomorrow's meeting, not the blue light from your phone, not your cortisol levels, Those are symptoms. The real cause is the part of yourself you've exiled into the shadow, and it's been scratching at the door of your consciousness every night, begging to be let back in. Here's what Jung observed in patient after patient. The sleeplessness always pointed to something specific, something unlived, something unsaid, something denied. One man couldn't sleep because he'd spent 20 years in a career that made his soul sick. But he couldn't admit it, because admitting it meant his entire adult life had been a waste. One woman lay awake night after night because she was living her mother's dream instead of her own. And the rage of that betrayal was eating her alive from the inside. Another patient's insomnia began the moment he got engaged, because deep down he knew he was marrying the wrong person, but he'd already sent the invitations. The unconscious doesn't care about your commitments. It doesn't care about what's practical or socially acceptable or financially responsible. It cares about truth. And when you're living in opposition to your authentic self, it will make your life unbearable until you course correct. Insomnia is just one of its tools. A particularly effective one because sleep deprivation breaks you down. It strips away your defenses. It makes you vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, the truth can finally get through. If this video is of any use to you, it might be the same for others. Please like and subscribe to make this video available to as much people as possible. I really believe we can heal the world on soul at the time, on better night of the time. Now you're beginning to understand what Jung meant when he said you must go through insomnia, not around it. The sleepless nights are not random torture. They're a very specific psychological process. Your consciousness is being forced to expand. The parts of yourself you've kept in darkness are demanding integration. And your ego, that fragile, constructed self you present to the world, is terrified of what that integration will cost you. Because here's the truth Jung discovered. Integration always requires sacrifice. You cannot bring the shadow into consciousness and keep your life exactly as it is. Something has to die. The false persona, the comfortable lies, the relationships built on who you pretended to be rather than who you actually are, the career that looks impressive but feels hollow, the version of yourself that everyone expects, that has to die, and your ego knows it. So it keeps you locked in this war, exhausted but unable to rest, desperate for sleep, but unable to surrender to what sleep requires. This is where Jung's concept of active imagination becomes crucial. You cannot just passively suffer through insomnia. You have to engage with it. You have to turn toward the sleeplessness and ask it what it wants. Not with your rational mind trying to solve a problem, but with genuine curiosity about what your unconscious is trying to communicate. Jung would have his patients lie awake and actually dialogue with their insomnia. Speak to it like it's an entity with intelligence and purpose, because it is. It's the voice of your disowned self. What are you trying to tell me? What part of my life is a lie? What am I refusing to see? What truth am I running from? These are the questions you ask in the dark, and then you listen. Not for logical answers, for images, for feelings, for the memories that surface, for the fantasies that emerge. For the sudden knowing that hits you at 3 in the morning when your defenses are finally down. One of Jung's patients, a successful businessman, spent months in sleepless agony until one night he allowed himself to fully imagine walking away from his company. Just the fantasy of it. And what came up was not fear of financial ruin. It was relief so profound it made him weep. That relief was the truth his unconscious had been trying to deliver. Within 6 months he'd sold his business. Within a year he was sleeping like a child, not because he'd fixed his sleep hygiene, because he'd fixed his life. This is the confrontation Jung spoke of. The moment you stop defending against what the insomnia is revealing and actually look at it, really look at it, the marriage that's been dead for years, the friendship that's actually toxic, the dream you abandoned because someone told you it was impractical, the anger you've been swallowing, the grief you've been postponing, the desire you've been denying. Whatever it is, it's there in the sleeplessness, waiting for you to finally acknowledge it. And here's where it gets dangerous, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Once the truth is conscious, you're responsible for it. You can't go back to the comfortable ignorance. Jung called this the point of no return. The moment when integration becomes inevitable. You either honor what you've discovered and change your life accordingly, or you condemn yourself to a deeper level of psychological suffering. The insomnia was just the warning. If you ignore the warning, the psyche has other methods: depression, anxiety, psychosomatic illness, breakdown. The unconscious will escalate until you listen. But if you do listen, if you take what the sleepless nights have shown you and actually act on it, if you speak the unspeakable truth, if you leave the situation that's killing you, if you reclaim the parts of yourself you've been denying, then something extraordinary happens. The war ends. The psyche stops attacking you because you're no longer betraying it. The shadow integrates because you've given it space in your conscious life. And the sleep, the deep regenerative sleep you've been chasing for months or years, it returns. Not because you've conquered insomnia, because you've surrendered to truth. Jung documented this transformation again and again. The patient who couldn't sleep becomes the patient who sleeps deeply and wakes refreshed. But they're not the same person anymore. They've been fundamentally changed by the integration. They're living in alignment now. The external life matches the internal truth. There's no more split, no more war between who they are and who they're pretending to be. And that alignment, that's what allows rest. This is what Jung meant by psychological sovereignty. You're no longer controlled by the expectations of others. You're no longer performing a role. You're no longer sacrificing your authentic self for approval or security or comfort. You've integrated the shadow. You've reclaimed the disowned parts. You've spoken the truth that was choking you, and now you're whole. Not perfect, not without problems, but whole. And a whole person can rest. The paradox Jung observed is this: the people who fight insomnia the hardest sleep the worst. The people who surrender to what insomnia is revealing sleep the best. Because fighting insomnia is just another form of fighting yourself. Another way of saying no to what the unconscious is demanding. But when you stop fighting, when you listen, when you integrate, when you change your life to reflect your actual truth rather than your constructed persona, the insomnia dissolves. Not because you've defeated it, because it's completed its purpose. You cannot heal insomnia with sleep techniques if the root cause is existential betrayal. You cannot meditate your way out of living the wrong life. You cannot supplement your way past the shadow. The only cure is integration. The only path is through. And the insomnia will persist until you take that path, until you descend into the darkness and face what's waiting there, until you bring it into the light and give it space in your conscious life. This is the dangerous peace Jung spoke of. The person who has done this work sleeps like the dead because they're no longer at war with themselves. They've integrated what was split. They've unified what was fragmented. They're living as one coherent being instead of a collection of conflicting parts. And that coherence, that internal alignment, that's what deep rest requires. Not a perfect sleep environment, not the right supplements, not the ideal bedtime routine, but a life that your psyche recognizes as true. Jung's final insight on insomnia was this: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And once you've claimed that privilege, once you've done the brutal, honest work of integration, once you've aligned your external life with your internal truth, then you can finally rest. Because rest is not something you achieve through technique. Rest is what happens when you stop betraying yourself. When the war ends, when you come home to who you actually are. That's when sleep returns. Deep, restorative, natural. Not because you fixed your insomnia, because you finally become whole.